The digital world we all live in, it didn't just pop into existence. It was built piece by piece, decision by decision. And it all started with a really simple, really human promise to connect us. But that journey from connection to what now feels a lot more like control, well, that's become one of the most important stories of our time. And it all goes back to a basic need we all share. Before anyone ever wrote a single line of code, this was the original social network. Not wires and screens, but just us. We're wired to be social, to gather and share things, stories, news, our lives. It's fundamental to who we are. And that's the key thing to understand. The technology was absolutely revolutionary, no doubt. But the reason it took off like it did was because it tapped into that ancient part of ourselves. The internet just took our desire to connect and scaled it up infinitely. Suddenly, your neighbor wasn't just next door. They could be on the other side of the planet. And then, things just exploded. It's kind of wild when you look at how fast this all happened. In less than a single decade, the whole world changed. You had 6 Degrees in '97, then Friendster, then the behemoth that was MySpace, and by 2006, Facebook and Twitter were on the scene. Each one built on the last, and this little idea turned into a global phenomenon. A whole new way of communicating was born. But as this new world was taking shape, there was this quiet but incredibly important battle going on. It wasn't just about getting the most users. It was about the philosophy of what a social platform should even be. And it was a shift from a world of user-driven chaos to one of platform-driven control. Just look at the two giants back then, MySpace and Facebook. Remember MySpace? It was a beautiful, chaotic mess of self-expression. It was loud, you could pimp your profile, add glittery backgrounds, have music that auto-played. It was all you. Facebook, though? Totally the opposite. It was quiet, uniform, almost bland. Everyone's page looked basically the same. One was chaos you could personalize, the other was a clean, orderly directory of people. And the big difference between them really came down to this core software concept called abstraction. Now, this is where a super technical idea has this massive social impact. Abstraction is all about hiding complexity. The people who built Facebook used it to create this really predictable, controlled space. They basically disciplined the user through the design, telling you what you could and couldn't do. MySpace, on the other hand, just kind of let all the messy code bubble up to the surface, letting users do almost whatever they wanted. And here's the consequence of that choice. Users might have loved the creative freedom on MySpace, but you know who hated it? Advertisers. They couldn't make sense of the chaos. But Facebook, with its neat little boxes and structured data, well, that was an advertiser's dream come true. The money started flowing towards control, towards predictability, and that pretty much sealed MySpace's fate. The architecture of control won. So, the architecture of control won, and it created these really orderly, data-packed environments. But that predictability had a price. It turned all of us into data points, data that was ready to be fed into the next big technological leap, artificial intelligence. We started using AI to predict things, and that's when a whole new, much more subtle kind of control started to emerge, one that looks backward to decide what happens next. This is so important to get. We have this idea that AI is somehow objective, that it's just pure math and logic. But it's not. Machine learning, at its core, is designed to do one thing: find patterns in old data and use those patterns to guess what's going to happen next. Its entire worldview is based on the past. And this is how you get a really dangerous feedback loop. The system gets trained on historical data, which, let's be honest, is filled with our own human biases and inequalities. The AI doesn't know any better. It just learns those biases as patterns. Then it makes predictions based on those patterns, and its decisions end up reinforcing the very same inequalities it learned from. It's a cycle. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. The machine predicts something based on the injustices of the past, and that prediction then helps create that very same injustice in the future. The past isn't just a memory. It's the blueprint the machine is programmed to build from over and over again. Now, you might be thinking, okay, so the solution is just to get better data, right? Fill in the gaps. But what if the problem isn't what's missing? What if the real problem is having way too much data on certain people? And this right here is the data paradox. For a lot of marginalized communities, the issue isn't that they're invisible in the data. It's the opposite. They're hyper-visible. Think about it. Our systems have way more data on poor and minoritized people because they're the ones who interact with public services that track absolutely everything. Let me give you a real and frankly heartbreaking example of this. In Allegheny County, Pennsylvania, they built an algorithm to help predict child abuse risk. It was trained on tons of data from public services, things like Medicaid, welfare, addiction treatment, so it knew a whole lot about low-income families. But wealthier families, the ones using private doctors and private services, to the system, they were practically invisible. Data ghosts. And the result? It's just tragic. The algorithm literally couldn't tell the difference between the struggles that come with poverty and the actual signs of neglect. Because most of the data it saw was from poor families, it just learned to equate poverty with risk. And so families were getting flagged, investigated, and in some cases, separated, all based on a deeply flawed conclusion drawn from biased data. So can we regulate our way out of this mess? Well, people are trying. You've got things like the EU's AI Act, which is a big step. It tries to ban the really dangerous stuff like social scoring, but man, the challenges are huge. Critics point out all these loopholes, big exceptions for national security. And it says data has to be representative, but that's so vague it leaves tons of wiggle room. It just goes to show how hard it is for our laws to keep up with the tech. When you put all this together, the controlled platforms, the biased algorithms, it forces us to ask a really deep, maybe even philosophical question. In a world that's being increasingly programmed and predicted by these systems, what happens to our own ability to choose? What does free will even mean anymore? Agency is just a word for our ability to act for ourselves, to make our own choices, and to change our own lives. It's something we've been fighting for centuries. But now, the nature of that fight is changing because our choices are being filtered through these massive digital systems we can't see and don't control. And let's be real, we all feel this on a small scale every single day. Just think about your phone's spell checker, constantly correcting a word you spelled perfectly fine. It's a tiny annoyance, right? But it points to a much bigger problem. If we can't even get these simple little tools to listen to us, what hope do we have with the giant complex systems making huge decisions about our lives? And this isn't some far-off science fiction. Just picture this. You decide to have a late-night snack. That's a choice. But your smartwatch logs it, sends the data to your health insurance company, and your monthly premium goes up automatically. Was that really a free choice when a network of machines calculated and executed the consequences before you were even done with your snack? There's a real irony in all of this. We all want to believe we have free will. We will convince ourselves we do. And at the same time, we're opening up our wallets and paying for the very technologies that are designed to direct our behavior with more and more precision. We're buying into the system that's boxing us in. So where does that leave us? This story, this journey from connection to control, it isn't over. Look at these kids. For them, interacting with AI is normal. It's just another part of their world. They are the ones who are inheriting this architecture of control that we've built, and they're going to be the ones who decide what to do with it, whether to build the walls higher or to redesign the whole thing. The future isn't set. It's being built right now.